So I'm going to speak about the space that I came from. My name is Shana Agate, by the way, and we'll all introduce ourselves. We'll explain how this is all going to work in a moment. But I flew here a few days ago from unceded Lenape land in the northern part of what is now called Manhattan in New York City, which is in the United States. The US, where I'm from, is on land that was acquired and taken through processes of colonization that are ongoing and built up by enslaved people and indentured labor. In this way, it's a place shaped through the structures and the day-to-day enactments of racism, sexism, capitalism, and heteronormativity. This is important to acknowledge, especially as we ask what justice means in design. And I've been thinking a lot about practices of empire since we went and saw 2,000-year-old empire remnants on Monday, and the ongoingness of empire as kind of a defining feature, both of where I'm from and where we sit. The US took a lot from Britain, apparently, the practice of empire, one of those things. And it is also important to me, while we talk about enactments of power, to acknowledge in particular the knowing, making, and the ongoing practices of living and shaping relationships to land, space, and ways of being together that pre-existed and also daily go beyond these violent orders. Those orders have been imposed on Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, women, genderqueer people, migrants, workers, and the land. So I want to acknowledge the elders and comrades who have taught me and those who taught them and back before that, while also bringing that wisdom and practice past, present, and future into our space today. And with that, I also want to say that we often speak to the elders, but I want to also acknowledge what we consistently learn from young people. By being surrounded by young people, I realize every day that I learn things that other people my age don't learn, just in the daily practice of life. So I thank all of those folks for being here. I thank all of you for being here. I want to bring all of that into the space today. And also thank all of you for being here, because y'all already gave papers, you're done, and yet you're still here doing this. So with that, do you want to start with your introduction and then?
Okay. Hello everyone. It's really nice to be here. My face-to-face conference after 3 years of the pandemic. And so I'm Shana Agate. I'm from the Center of Scientific Research and Technology Applications in Egypt. And myself and Shana will chair this panel, which we hope to be provocative and a nice introduction exercise, talking about our differences. We also realized that it could be some uncomfort for the issue itself, to be unsettling for some of us, but we would like this to be an exercise for us to stay with our uncomfort and like we deal with differences every day. So the way this session will go, we start with the short round of introductions for everyone, and then I will have some stories that will speak to two of the main questions that we pose to the panelists. I don't know Yoko, but I would like before that to remind everyone with the guidelines being together, we added one more rule to that, which since we're in UK, so I kind of asked some of one of my colleagues in the law school, so what do you do when we discuss controversial things? And she said that we could use the Chatham House rule, which is basically so everyone in the meeting, including those who are online, are free to use any information received, but without identifying a person or participant or their affiliation. So I hope you all agree to that. So we start with the introductions, and then we'll have a couple of provocative questions, and we'll have stories to speak to these questions, and then we'll open up for questions for everyone. Right?
Great, thank you. Okay. So I hope everyone that you're going to see some live facilitation here. Everyone got my email about doing a short introduction of yourself. So I think if you don't mind, I will say whose name is on the side, so y'all don't have to worry about it. But Reem, would you mind introducing yourself first?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm
yes. Thank you. On topic.
And also, we just ask you to amplify as much as possible for the people in the room. The microphone should be doing both things on Zoom and in here, but they're not working for Zoom. But they are working for Zoom, so keep using the mic.
Okay. All right.
I'll
be very Arab speaking.
Everyone else can channel it in Arab as well.
So I'm Newcastle. I am based in was folk design in Northumbria. And I've been acknowledging my homeland where I'm from, Lebanon. But today I also want to acknowledge that within the colonial legacies and debris, the people of the UK who supported resistance and also have welcomed immigrants and have voted time and time again to welcome immigrants. Newcastle is a unique place, and its people have really shown a lot of welcome and love and care. Not all of them, but I feel like we also need to acknowledge these people that resist from within. Thank you.
Next.
Yo, this just
Gary?
carried away.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Gary from Malaysia. I'm Chinese Malaysian. But you know, if you understand Malaysia, we have the West Malaysia side and the East Malaysia side. We are separated by a South China Sea. So I'm from the East Malaysia side, I will call it, the Borneo Island, if you understand that. Yeah. Our culture is a little bit different compared to the West side, I would say. The West side is more aggressive and the East side is more tolerance. And I would like to acknowledge as well, you know, those I'm not an Iban, but this is an Iban traditional shirt. It's a warrior shirt, some sort like that. I've been requested by them to at least wear it up to represent, because the paper that I'm writing is about them. It's about culture of the Iban people. And I really appreciate them because even though we are different, we started off really different. They know I'm a Chinese guy and they know they are the Iban guy. But we come to a point that we can work together. This is something that I really appreciate it a lot and appreciate their cultures and appreciate myself as well. So we are working on the transcultural side of things, community-based core design and working on community networks with them. Because during the pandemic, that is the main challenge for all of them because they can't get online. There's about 30 minutes away from town only, but there is no internet, nothing. And this is where we really want to help and come along, but not to some sort of, we call it, impose our idea into them, but we're trying to work together, looking at the values and putting in what I know, and we work together. Yeah, so this is my just introduction for the time being. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Serena. It's a little bit like Lotto.
Okay, I'm Serena from Cape Town, South. Well, I'm from Durban, but I'm studying at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. We have a very bloody history in my country. But I also think that even though the news reports are still pretty dark, that our country has come a very, very long way in recognizing that our differences is what makes us stronger. And that was something that features in my work a lot, is that the depth of culture and the differences in these cultures actually gives us a lot of learning. So in my work, I'm always really interested in working with communities. It must always uplift communities, but to work with communities, much like Gary said, not to impose my ideas on them, but to understand their ideas and to build with them and to build within their context. Like, I'm honored to visit their space.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jaden Faru. I am also from South Africa, from Cape Town, studying through the University of Cape Town. I am a PhD researcher, and we do work in maternal and child well-being and supporting care through digital technologies, specifically looking at methods in participatory design. And through our work, I'd like to, through our experiences, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands we worked on, especially those who were dispossessed and are still waiting for reparations and for their rightful ownership to be acknowledged officially, because as time has gone by, these things have a manner of getting stuck in bureaucratical processes, but people are still hopeful, people are still waiting, and I'd like to acknowledge those that continue to fight for the ones who have already gone without receiving and without experiencing that ownership and being on a place to call their own. So yeah, I'd like to do that, and thank you. It's really a privilege to be here as well.
Hello, my name is Maria Alejandra, but everybody call me Male. I work in the UAL. I teach service design. I'm from Venezuela and I live in Bristol. Bristol is renowned because it's a center. It was a center of slavery with a line direct ship to La Guaira, from where my ancestors can recall the first memories of our ancestors that come as a slave to Venezuela. My other ancestors were Catalan and German, and from the indigenous of the Timotocuicas, as the people from the Andes in Venezuela. So I have all those bloods in my blood as mestiza Venezuelan. And I live now in a place that also was a brewery, and it was next to the sugar processing part of Bristol, where the sugar came from my land. And that connect me with the brewery in here, that it was already mentioned. And that connect me maybe with all of you, because mestizos of today are kind of connected with all of you. So thank you for having me here. My work is in ethics of technology, and about 2 or 3 years ago, I've been moving to think about decentered from European. So trying to think about pluriversal ethics of technology.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carlos Vaca. I am from Mexico, and I live in a city that calls Puebla, Mexico. And near to Puebla is Cholula. And in Cholula, there is a symbol of what happened with all of the bloody history we have in Latin America. There is a church that it is up to a pyramid. There is a pyramid just down the church, and then we have buried a lot of pyramids. It is the longest pyramid in the the widest pyramid in the world. Sorry for my English. And there is a street, and the capitalist is there, no? You know, a lot of tourists, a lot of restaurants, no? And the people from the community selling their handcrafts, etc. So this is for me a big symbol of what happened with the modernity, no? And also, as I work in an organization who collaborate with a lot of indigenous communities in Latin America, now in other parts of the world, I always try to break my paradigms and think that every people in every country and every community is different, and they have very different between each other, despite they are a few kilometers near one to the other. So this is what I am always trying to rethink.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you to hold on to that. And unless Yoko needs it. Oh gosh. Is it happening? Are we going to jump up now or when it happens?
When it goes, yeah.
Should we keep going in the meantime?
No.
They're not planning a fire. That's a test.
Well, I've been saying nothing's on fire.
Well, Rachel, you have done it now. Should we keep going until we hear the alarm? Would you mind advancing the slide? Oh, actually, let's leave it there. Because, do you mind if I just improvise for a second?
Yes.
So I'm mindful of the time and the imminent fire alarm. So imminent, not eminent. So we picked two questions of the many amazing questions that the organizers wrote to go along with the session, which you can find in the program. And we asked everyone to tell a very short story from their practice or their research or their life experience. Through those questions? How many? Can you advance
3 and 4
questions,
in advance, yeah, okay.
Then we'll come back.
Yes.
There we
Back.
go.
Yes, thank you.
So, sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say, so we've asked everyone, including ourselves, to tell a short story from practice as a means of trying to ground ourselves in experience with actually participating through difference. And this was an idea that Shema had and that I was thrilled by. As a way of trying to not only have an intellectual conversation, not that stories are not intellectual, but to ground it again in narrative. That's fair to say. Should I model? Should I start? I'm gonna time myself for 3 minutes. So I'm timing people, but I won't let the alarm go off because that's rude. But I will show a sign of my performance. Okay. So as I said, my name's Shayna Agid. I may be about to be interrupted by a fire alarm, which would be just like teaching, so I'm ready. The very brief story I want to tell is that a lot of the work that I do is a collaboration with other folks in education. And for a long time, I taught a class with folks who did education primarily with formerly incarcerated people in the US in New York City. I have done anti-prison and anti-policing organizing since I was in my early 20s, so for over half my life. I thought I knew what I was doing, but I have not experienced incarceration myself, even though it's touched me in other ways. I showed up to class one day with a new tool that I had gotten for myself because I'm horribly organized, horrible, absolutely terribly organized. And I had gone to the office store and I got myself the most amazing thing, which was this clipboard that had like a little case and you could like clip it and I could hold all the things. And I was like, this year, I'm not going to lose students' notes or my address book or whatever the things were that I needed. And I walk into the classroom where we had done all this prep with the teachers. I was super excited. And the first thing anyone said to me was, oh, that's that thing. That's like the books that the cops carry. And I was like, damn it. Damn it. So for all this time, for years at that point, I had done work around the violence of policing. I had done work to counter that violence. But because I didn't have a lot of personal experience being arrested or being harassed on a daily basis myself because of my white skin privilege and my class privilege in particular, this one artifact never occurred to me as an artifact of policing. So that's my story. I immediately put it away in my bag and I never brought it back. And I had to begin sort of trying to rebuild trust from that moment as an outsider of that space. So I'm done. The fire alarm has not yet gone off. I know.
Yeah. So before I go on with my story, so I like, if you're wondering, so Carlos had the widest pyramids. So if you're wondering where is the tallest pyramids, that's probably the one that we have in Egypt. Okay. So my story. So in like 5 or 6 years back, I started with colleagues, what we call the Arab HCI. I come from human computer.
That's like the best fire alarm ever. Okay. I'm restarting your time.
So I found this one because it's not working well. Okay.
Oh no.
No, I just reached my phone. So I come from like human computer interaction, so what we call HCI. So a few years back, louder. I'll try. Okay. So few years back, so I started with calling what we call the Arab HTI community, which is a community to recognize the fact that we don't have human-computer interaction, curriculum and research work in our own country. So then, shall I wait? Go on. So the conference that we used to hold our workshops and community meetings was the PRI conference, it's the HPI. And then one year, the PRI conference decided to do what we call the newcomers reception. So they have all communities set up a small tables and leaflets and everything. And if you're first time outside, you just go and try to meet people around. So I was standing at the Arab HCI table and then someone approached me and said, okay, so someone can you hear this and said, this is the Middle East table. And I was like, oh, okay, this is not really accurate. This is the Arab HCI table. And we had a conversation, where are you from? And the person said, we are from Israel. And I mean, so I had to explain that for selecting the Arab HCI, we were specific because we know that the Arab countries share cultural history and also they share a language. But also, and to be absolutely honest, because we had this conversation before, that why not calling the Arab HCI Middle East? We were thinking that if we want Arab HCI to be effective for our Palestinian friends, for instance, we can't really be inclusive like Israeli. And there is a difference between having an Arab HCI event and invite everyone, because we invite everyone coming from Israel or like the West or whatsoever to our event, and having a Middle East event where our Palestinian colleagues would be less comfortable to have it. So so this story is kind of really an example for where we use difference to assert identity, but also kind of set some boundaries and make a political statement. So I hope it's a full provoke, and I hope I didn't exceed the time.
Not a big one at all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
What's next?
So I think what we'll do is just pass this around. And if you see me move basically and sit up, that means I'm about to show you the sign that says it's time to wrap up. So we leave a little time for talking. Thank you.
So I cannot have the experience not to work with the difference, but work where I am the difference. So my participatory design experience started when I was a Venezuelan student, and I worked with the Yanomami people in the south of Venezuelan Amazon, and I was Blanquita. And then I came to the England and I made a PhD. And I was working actually in collaboration with Newcastle and the Culture Lab. And I was working with troubled families in Manchester local authority. Troubled families, that's the start of terrible name. And they thought I was Latina, and she couldn't understand our troubles at all. And who is she to come to work with us? And then I was working in Lancaster with people with dementia. And then again, I was Latina, and also why she will understand the stories that we remember. She has no recollection of that. And then I started working on ethics of technology with corporate people like Microsoft, Nokia, people that build radios, Brussels, people, policymakers. And then I was a designer that dressed in colorful colors and want to play cards with us. And we are all serious men. Why? And then I went to live in China. And that was the weirdest, because I started not working in China, but in Malaysia and Indonesia, and suddenly I was rich. But all of that wasn't so difficult as to work with the people that don't want to work with the difficult. Like in the last project that we are doing, we're trying to get some funding to create commons in Indonesia for populations that are prone to disaster and flooding. And we we don't get the funding, and we get to the final moments of the funding, and finally we have a chat with the panelists because we say we are applying with this work, we have the network, we have all of this. Why is that we don't get it? And they say, well, because what you're proposing has been done millions of times. We know what is necessary for flooding. We just ship bottled water. And that is the final thought. And that for me was like the most difficult. I mean, I could even be British if you want me to be. But, I mean, how do you deal with the people that don't want to work with people? That's my feeling, I think. And that's my story.
Thank you.
That would be like telling a bit about my background because I'm from computer science background. So cybersecurity, all these programming science, all those things is my background. But when I started to work to get a community network out, community network means that try to put up some Wi-Fi mesh network. The idea came to me is that we cannot do this kind of things with the community. We need them to work together with us, rather than to just throw some mesh Wi-Fi down there and say that if you work and you just use it. So this is where I'm starting to explore on ways how to actually work with the community. Because when I'm talking about network, IP address, network routers, they're looking at like this is the alien coming from another space. Yeah. So this is where I explore things that how to make the community to say no to me. Because when I asked them in the beginning, when I went to the longhouse in Sarawak, there's a lot of longhouses. Longhouse is really long. In the beginning, it's really long. 15 to 80 families can stay together in one flat house. And they have a lot of differences between them, but the same together with togetherness. There will be one hitman where people go to mouth. So because when I asked them to sketch about me, they put me as wearing a tie and suit coming in. And they sketch themselves as traditional wear, from there. So I know they is different. I know that they look at me very different. So I can't use the same concept to do my mesh Wi-Fi with them. Because they will always say yes to me because they look at me like wearing a suit with a tie. Normally, someone too high. But I don't want to be there. I want to be on par with them. I want to be like really working together with them. I want them to understand, okay, that some of the things I know, okay, I can teach you. But some of the things that you know, you need to teach me. Otherwise, you will always yes and yes and yes. So what we did is my experience is that we trigger them with 3D models. We clean up some 3D models, 3D modeling. Okay. So I know they're very much. So we started with printing all these fish, fish in the river, some animals that is related to them, those are wild boar or some chickens and everything. So I print the 3D stuff and show them, okay, good or not. Wow, they really fire up, they really fire up, and this is not a kid. This is not a tab, this is not something for that they give me a lot of comments. I say, oh, now it's good. They say no to me. So I know that, okay, we started the conversation. So the next thing I do is that, after I discuss the supervisor, we trigger them with something that they don't know what to say. I put in Wi-Fi router. I put in RJ45 paper network. I put in some other things. They look at the things I say. I ask them, you start to comment on it. I say, you can start a comment on it. Then they look at the things and look at me and start to laugh. I don't think so. This is in the village. So I cannot comment. So now, okay. Now I want to show you that, okay, these are the things I know. So I will teach you. But those are the things that you know. You must teach me. We need to come to a point that we can work together. So I appreciate that proposal space that we created. And we start to argue a lot of things after that. In terms of respect, in terms of a lot of things, And Ivan's culture always comes with these welcoming drinks. Okay, I don't know. Okay, I will just stop there. This welcoming drink is alcoholic. Some people would not like to take it. So this is the argument always comes to them. Why you force people to drink? No, this is welcome. when I tell them your values don't tell me that, welcome must bring this thing. Your welcoming is warm and your welcoming is always, to be with people nicely. So we come up with some interaction protocol, say that, okay, for those who cannot take alcoholic things, they can reject it politely. And how to do it, they teach us. And those who can take it, yeah, you go ahead and party, no worry. Okay, so that's my experience of differences, yeah.
Thank you.
When I was asked this question, I thought, oh, I can talk about some of my work with refugees and the differences there. And I have talked about them previously, but I decided I'm going to talk about differences that I know will break my heart and break people's heart. So I am from villages in the mountain of Lebanon, where during the Civil War, there was a lot of fighting within the villages. I was born after the Civil War, so the villages have always been my safe haven. When there was the Israeli war on Lebanon, it was a place that we had to get to be safe. But I am terrified of engaging with the differences within the village because, and here I related to Ziad Ash'ar's analysis of what is design in Arabic, and it is tasmim, and one of the roots of tasmim is samim, which is innermost, and also val. And in the villages I'm from, we say to people who we love, the places that we love, as samim al-adab, the innermost of my heart. And so if I was going to approach design in those spaces, it will be from there. And in the villages where there is a form of reconciliation, but it was one of, we will not talk about the war. I remember when my grandmother's Christian neighbors moved back, we all helped them move back, but there was no conversation about the war. And it's terrifying. It's terrifying because when we start engaging with the differences that are within our hearts and with the people and places with our hearts, we will identify differences that played into violence. We will find out whose hands carried us as children who had to enact violence because of the warlords. And so I keep coming back to, how do we reconcile ourselves within our hearts with those differences that were imposed on people? And then how do we do that also with the places and people within our hearts? I don't have an answer, but at least I think I'm starting to process the emotions. And I think that's something that we don't talk enough about when engaging with differences, the emotional part, when it is something very intimate. And I feel like compared to that, the work that I've done with refugees, there was always a solidarity, an understanding of solidarity. People try to find these commonalities throughout the process, but it's much different when you're engaging with differences within your communities. Like, one of the questions I always ask my colleagues here in the UK, I was like, how much research are you doing about Brexit? That is close to the heart of people in the UK, and it's difficult. And so that was my take on differences.
Thank you. Thanks. So I'm going to share a story about how, what sort of came out of our workshops, and it's about how we speak about things differently or view things differently when it comes to eliciting responses and engagement. And during one of our workshops, so we used design cards to depict some of the maternal and child health challenges that communities often face. And what we did at the beginning of workshops is go through each challenge card to get a shared understanding of how that challenge how the community understands that challenge and what the experiences are. And one of the challenges was postpartum care. And in our workshops, we desired a participant group that was reflective of the community, involved fathers, involved grandmothers, as well as mothers who have often been sort of the main participants, and the burden has often been on mothers, and that's what we sort of wanted to combat. And while going through the postpartum care card, the fathers and the male participants refused to talk about it, and they didn't want to comment on any of the sort of real experiences of mothers postpartum. And it sort of solidified, like the postpartum challenge card was there because it's often ignored, and even in trying to talk about it, it's not something that is common. It's not something that's discussed. And so we almost had to, we had intermediaries, thankfully, and they were very sensitive to the ways in which you introduce new ideas and new perspectives, because there's often the risk of the imposition of what we believe, oh, but this is a challenge. You need to be seeing this as a challenge, whereas it's something that they feel deeply uncomfortable with. And I think rather than enhancing that discomfort by drilling into the group that you need to talk about this, on our side, there should have been a way in which we at least introduce these concepts and these challenges in a way that facilitates more conversation than is already opposing their normal way of thinking about the challenge. And I think that's something on our side, looking at how the design tools we use can affect the different ways people view their own challenges, as well as how their perspective of their loved ones and the things they go through shift during that process. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to try this. So I grew up very rural in the Free State, and I could speak Sesotho before I could speak English. Okay, lost a lot of Sesotho over the years. So I was very afraid going into the communities, particularly Limpopo, because I am definitely Afrikaans, and I'm definitely not someone these communities are going to relate to. So I was really, really worried, even though I understand the culture quite a bit because I was raised, and it's actually quite dear to me. So going into Limpopo, I was very nervous. And when we arrived at Limpopo, I kept hearing the word Morena, Morena, and I know this means king. And I remember looking at Jaden and going like, and then I said, oh, there's members of the royal family here. And then I realized that immediately the power relationships in that room is drastically different than what we planned for. We didn't know we were going to have members of the royal family. And that brings in this importance of intermediaries, because the headsman, which is like the chief under the kings, and the chief's brother was there, the king's brother was there, and the headsman stood up and he said, I give consent on behalf of all of these people. And then, if we had stepped wrong there, if we didn't have Lifu who understood the culture, we'd go like, absolutely, thank you so much, but please can they just also give us consent, because we'll be in such trouble if we don't do it. We would have alienated that community completely. We would have had to rebuild. And then that was so true to me that I understand that even though I had to step back and let someone who's truly vested in that community, let them run this workshop and just observe. And that it's important to understand that you're on their turf, and that whatever their culture predicts and whatever their rules are, no matter what you believe, is what's important. And by letting Lifu and them run that workshop, and by just sitting and observing, we actually got such rich data. Yeah, even though the power differentials were completely off and it was aimed at mothers and the chieftains ran the whole workshop, we still got what we needed out of there. It was a truly interesting experience for me.
Can we?
Thanks, Yoko.
I'm sorry because I developed a little presentation. It's just to me to guide myself. So what I talked about these questions, a lot of stories come to my mind, no, and personal stories, but also like an organizational stories. So I want to share with you two of them that change a lot the work we do with the communities. You know, everyone thinks communication and always think about connectivity in a lot of cases. And we are sure now that connectivity doesn't solve poverty, doesn't solve the problems of the community itself. It generates more, really. So as we work with community networks, the communities always think, oh, they work with mobile networks or internet networks. So we are the guys, the internet guys in the community. But what happened was these two stories. So next one, please. The first one is in Michoacán, in Huitzontla. It's an indigenous community with a lot of violence because of the narcos there. And they called us to install a mobile network, a mobile 2G network there. So we always develop a first workshop in which we can explain what is community networks, what is community communication, etc. And we try to identify the communication needs in the community. So when we did that, the result was the people saying, we want to recover the public spaces that we can't use anymore because of the violence. So they decided to recover all the soccer field and start a tournament and start working with that, with soccer. No, they don't think in mobile networks anymore in this first stage. And then they decide to start a community projection of movies. And then they decided to develop some radio contents, podcasts, etc. And then they painting a lot of buildings. So they start really a communication for peace processes beyond the mobile network. So it happened in 2016. And now they don't have their own mobile network because the Telcel, that it is a big company, have coverage now there. But they solve the problem. They recover all these public spaces. And the next one is from La Sierra Tarahumara in Chihuahua. This is very different communities, no? It's what I was trying to talk. In this context, this is big mountains region in which the communities, the indigenous communities are very small, maybe 2 or 3 families in one community, and then very far another community. So they walk a lot. They are famous for running marathons in all over the world, and without shoes. It is what they do. And there is also a mestizos communities that has a lot of power, and is where the church are, where the people, the schools, etc., etc. So in this context, what happened was we went there. The government asked us for a consultation about the internet connectivity there, and the people who are in the communities, indigenous communities, they talk about the needs, and they don't need really internet. They want to communicate each other. Sorry.
Take your time. Wrap up when you can.
They want to communicate each other, so don't need really internet, and it is very difficult to have that. So we develop with them HF networks, no, high frequency networks, so they can share that. And we are also developing in the Amazon region a system in which we can share data, an email, a photograph, etc., through HF networks. So we will install that, and we are training people there. We develop also community projections for movies, and they develop the video letters, a video, the kids of the communities. So yeah, for finish, the next one. We develop all this strategy, all this methodology, in which the main point or the starting point is to reflect the reflection of the territory. And this is like a cycle that it is very difficult to explain to another communities, no? So it is, the time is the community time, and the needs of the communication is the main goal. Not the main goal is to use a technology. So we put in the center again the communication and not the technologies. And you can find it, the next one, in this link, redesac.org.mx, publicaciones, and you have these two guides. So if you want to explore more about what I was talking. Thank you. I'm sorry for the time.
It's totally fine.
So I think we could open up for questions right now and reflections. And even if you don't have a question, we're happy to listen to your story.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, and there is, yeah, Mike's at the end of the room, and we have a portable one. So you want. Yeah.
Hi, thanks so much for all your stories. I thought they were really interesting. Apologies for my voice. One of the stories, I think maybe the first one, really reminded me of a time I was working in Liverpool in the UK. I was making models with some young people, and for a community bakery, we were making a scale model. So I took very enthusiastically my cutting mat and, you know, all my things and cardboard, and walked into this, what we call a pupil referral unit. So for children who are maybe outside mainstream education. So they walked in and I showed them all the equipment, you know, right, we've got the scale rulers, got the modeling knives, all this stuff. And I turned around and then they were gone. There was only about 6 of them, but they were like gone. I was like, where are they? And the teacher kind of looked down at what we were doing and went, oh no, they just came back from an assembly about the injuries that knives, and they'd shown them these awful images to try and discourage them from using knives. And I just felt like an absolute idiot. So it was very similar. I was like, oh God. So we got them back eventually and got them computer modeling, and then they were happy. And I did all the cutting after that. So but it reminded me a lot of that, because it took me, I just thought I was having a fun model session, but to them, this little blade was very dangerous. So yeah, it just reminded me of that. I just wanted to share the story. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't know, is this little fuzzy creature here on my shirt working? I hope so. In the meantime, it's like having a little pet. One of the things that in our conversations that we really thought about a lot was the way in which, you know, the kind of story you're telling, the ways in which we can come into a space sort of thinking that the tools that we have or the things that we have to share or what have you will be the thing around which action happens, right? And I think, Carlos, your story gets to this in really, you know, profound ways. I think is one of those sets of differences that sometimes we're not prepared to negotiate, even for a community of designers who are always thinking about the ways that design is not necessarily central to what we're actually doing. But I think one of the other things just in the story is that when Shaima and I were preparing for this, that in the story that you shared, was thinking about the ways in which understanding the positioning ourselves so that we can understand the politics, not in both in an emotional sense and in a geopolitical sense, in a very real way, understand the politics of the spaces that we're in. And I think so many of the stories that people here have told are about like the ways that identity gets related to us or on us in ways that may or may not reflect how we think of ourselves, but may reflect the conditions in which we're working and invite new and different questions. Or I think some of the materiality that folks have been talking about is also really interesting, and thinking about how materiality, like in the story that you were telling, Gary, invites conflict or not conflict, but disagreement, where disagreement otherwise would not be, there would not be space for it, but where you recognize the importance of it. But I think that there's something that we tend to shy away from in thinking that difference is a thing to be solved, right, or managed. And so one of the sort of things that we really were talking a lot about were what are stories of ongoing difference of unsettled conflict, of being, as you opened, being able to sit with the discomfort, and what that also teaches us, I think, specifically in relationship to participatory design and to the practices that we have. I don't know if you all have heard things in each other's stories that you want to comment on. We can pass a mic down if there are other folks here.
We had similar experiences where we bought a whole batch of design cards with really interesting technologies on them that we were super interested to see how this community will ideate with it. And I had great ideas for internet in a box and big ideas if we're going to build really, really interesting things. And the community didn't touch any of those. They referred back to what they want. And actually the one community in Cape Town asked for posters. And it's difficult to reconcile in yourself that, you want to build the world's most best technology to get these people everything, but they don't want that. They want, and then to accept that we have to do what they want, and that our idea of something that will work and their idea of something that will work is vastly different, and that's okay. Yeah, so that was interesting for me to learn. Yeah.
Kind of in relation to that, I think one of the issues is that the university ethics system avoids conflict. They're tailored to be culturally sensitive in a manner that means that we are blank slates in the field. And I didn't come from a design background. I was from a public health background, and that's what I was taught very much kind of the scientific way. And so when I first started working with the Syrian refugee community in Lebanon, I was very conscious that during that time, the ethnicity that I am from, the religious ethnicity that I was born into, the Druze ethnicity, had sided with the regime in Syria. And I didn't want that to affect the relationship that I had been building for over a year with this community. And then at one point, we were just sat having coffee, and usually I'd bring breakfast with me, and they'd be from the village where I'm from. And the woman started laughing. They're like, "You're always trying to avoid these questions, but our cousin lives in that village, and so we know you're Druze." I'm like, "Oh, now we can talk about it." And I think we tend to forget that people are engaging with differences every day, and we try to silo it out to avoid conflict when it creates all inner conflict and there's stress for everyone involved. So yeah, so that was my experience with that.
Mm-hmm. 3 minutes? Yeah, so one person here and then.
I wanted to ask you about what your take is. What are the differences that you wouldn't tag along with? Like, you might encounter structures that you so fundamentally disagree with that you actually want to work against them, or set up frames in which they can be countered. And whose decision then is that, and how much are we bringing our own views in this? So do we always need to be respectful of the difference that we encounter? I was thinking about your story with chieftains kind of taking over, that session. You kind of had to accept that that's the difference in culture background, but you could imagine that this story would be much worse in terms of that you wouldn't get access to any other voice in there, and that's not something that you want. So how far are we willing to kind of accept difference as something positive and something that we want to work with and accept?
I think I'll always accept cultural differences, and I'll always lean towards accepting what's in the community. But if we all have a value system and we all have a line that even if you want to cross it, you cannot, it's stone. So if anything where anybody, if there was definite harm going to come out of that, I would have reacted differently innately, even though I shouldn't. I would have reacted differently. So I think you can accept differences if they serve and if they are rich and if they do not impose real harm on another human being, then they're beautiful. But if there's a chance, if I had felt that any of the women in that workshop were probably being abused, I would definitely have spoken up. Yeah.
Do we have time for Molly, right? I'm so bad with names.
I just wanted to extend your point about the university powers of assimilation. And how do we teach the difference? I don't know how are your courses that you teach, but in my case, I have one British student amongst all international students. And we teach service design, blueprints, tools in a way that works in local authorities in England. I wonder how you're dealing with, how can we teach and form students that embrace their difference and come here and kind of test some methods, but then think how these methods will work or not in their own contexts. I think that is a lacking, at least in my program, and I constantly thinking about that and trying to change around, but it's for me it's another ceiling. I don't know, I sit here to ask questions rather than to answer them.
No.
There are so many things that I don't have the answer, but I was thinking about that, trying to don't talk about the difference, trying to, and it's actually a way of assimilation. And I felt how I assimilate in order to get a PhD, in order to get a career, blah, 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 blah. I have to write in a way, I have to talk in a way. And it's only on that you have certain space that you go, oh, okay, now I can talk as Venezuelan. Dealing with this difference and the assimilation power of machines of knowledge is incredible. And it's something that I confront every day in my classes.
I feel really sad about this, but we have to end this amazing conversation. I will take that from you, sadly. I do want to just thank everybody for your time and your thoughtfulness and your willingness to put in the energy, and thank you as well for working on this together. We met through this process, so that's also been delightful. Anything that you want to say?
Well, yeah, I would like also to thank everyone and for the audience. I hope for this conversation to continue beyond the panel, and I hope that we convinced you that difference is a complex, multi-layered concept, and differences are not easy to deal with. So hopefully this will be an ongoing conversation. Thanks for the organizers for putting together the panel. And I think now we hand over to John. He has something to say.